beginning of this, there's a 1 second pause, a 2 second pause, so apologies for that. I'm getting old. But I decided to make this recording part of the Real Lives feature. Real Lives is here to discuss things that we don't want to discuss sometimes, or really to make you more aware. As you may remember, last week I had Ross come on and talk about the migrants who have been trapped at hotels. So just a little explanation, this is part of the Real Lives thing. The following day will not be the news, that'll be on Friday. So listen and learn. Welcome to a special for Stand Up Speak Out UK. I've seen a few things over the last months, I think. Actually, the last month more than anything else that's made me worried about how we're surviving financially. I was looking for somebody who was interested in economics. I put a request out, and then a gentleman, Mr. Barry James, before I get the name confused, I know loads of Barrys, said he'd like to come along and talk about it. So I'm going to let Barry introduce himself and what he's interested in. We're going to go to the subject specific. Thank you for coming, Barry.
Ian, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. So my background, by the way, is mostly technology. So I've been at the forefront of technology for, way too many decades, at least four. So that gives you a pretty good idea of how many grey hairs I've got if on the radio. And I'm, as I say, not in the least interested in economics per se. I've become immersed in economics as someone who wanted to initially answer a question. So and ended up creating something called humane economics, because the economics we have isn't humane; it's predatory. And that came from a little while ago at the beginning of COVID. Some things happened and caused me to ask one searching question: not whether we're wrecking the planet, we are. Not whether we're slowing down, because we're not, we're accelerating. Not whether we're making pretty much everyone, apart from a few billionaires, poorer and poorer, because we are. And we're accelerating that process as well. But why? How did we get here? Why can't we stop? And that started life as potentially a book called Why We're All Screwed and What We Can Do About It, which is still sitting waiting for me to get around to publishing all the research I did. But the research basically, was very clear. It's all there in the historical records, that the reason we're in this mess is we're running the world on a set of ideas, which came in, beginning from the 1970s, in fact, 1970 was one of the very first big events. That was cooked up before that from exactly 1947, and again we've got all the records about the Hayek and his folks and how they created this movement that goes on to today, and where it is, and we can you can go to Tufton Street and knock on the door. It's where Liz Truss came from, and there's equivalents in America and so on. It's neoliberal economics, and fundamentally, it's replaced morality in the common weal, in the global economic system, and it's replaced it with a doctrine of predatory greed, and that's really what we're up against, and why we no matter how, we've got all sorts of movements, all sorts of organizations trying to get us to change direction, governments, councils, and so on, try this from time to time, but they can't do it because it's so deeply embedded. So I now run Humane Economics, working on this issue. I also run Humane Energy. We're doing a project called Green Street you might want to look out for. But that's kind of how I ended up here, Ian.
I have a question then, because you've put a few points in my mind. Oh God, I just left school in 1972, I'm thinking about how the world was then. I do remember, a little aside, my uncle who lived with us, he passed away, I was 16 at the time, so that was 1971. He gave me £4,000 as an inheritance, a lot of money in those days. Yeah. I remember taking out £100. Blimey, I said 80 quid left at the end of the day, and I was really splodging out. Yeah. But you said it's about profit. Profit for who? That's my question.
Well, it's not. There's nothing wrong with profit. Nothing absolutely wrong with profit. But the first really visible signs of this set of economic ideas, and they actually did call them doctrines, by the way, and they are doctrines. They've dressed it as science, and there's a Nobel Prize, which actually isn't a Nobel Prize, by the way. It's another prize awarded alongside the true Nobel Prizes to make it look like it's actually paid for by a bank. None of the others are.
Which bank?
The Riksbank, which is the Danish central bank, I think. Where it's hosted. So the idea of this, of economics, certainly in this form, being scientific in any way, is completely insupportable and wrong, by the way. But in July, I think it was 7th of July 1970, the first really big shot was fired when Milton Friedman published an article in the New York Times saying, it was titled "A Friedman Doctrine," and saying and the title was "The Social Responsibility of Business is to maximize its profits, and it's the maximization of profits that's the problem, not balance, not not within reason, and this is license to do exactly what's going on. So we ignore the planet, we ignore the ecology, we ignore the climate, we ignore everything, and we're allowed and encouraged and pressed. And I know this because I became a small business person myself first in 1989 on the 1st of November. And I remember the conversations I had with bankers. And it's part of the culture. It wasn't them individually, but basically saying, now you've got to be hard-nosed. Now, if you're going to be in business, you've got to maximize your profits. And that's the problem. If you remember back to those days when you got your inheritance, Ian, I can remember that far back as well. And I'm not saying it was perfect. It wasn't. In many ways, there were huge problems. I remember the winter of discontent and all of that. But one of the things that was very different was that business people had a sense of responsibility and could be held to account, and that's no longer the case.
Well, actually, one of my best friends, unfortunately, and I will say this clearly, here it is. He's got his money. So it's about, we're very interested in what you're saying. And it's always about profit. You said to me, I started this, what are you going to earn out of it? And I'm not, of course I'm going to become a millionaire, But no, I'm going to bring you a little bit forward to the present. Would you say that's the reason we're in this problem now?
Yeah, it's absolutely the reason. It's the outworking of that over those decades that is accumulating and getting worse. And in effect, what's been happening is the economy, the world economy, has been increasingly hollowed out, and we've had QE after QE, and it's become in the assessment of a lot of the more sane economists, otherwise known as heterodox economists, who don't follow the neoliberal
Sorry,
nonsense.
what's that phrase again?
Heterodox economists.
Okay.
People like Steve Keen. He's brilliant. He's very scientific in his approach. He can prove everything he says. People like Ann Pettifer, who you might have heard of, who was responsible for in the year 2000 for the Jubilee campaign that persuaded the world, President Clinton and Blair and Brown and went around the world, wrote off $100 billion worth of unpayable third world debt. And she's a heterodox economist. So I spell heterodox SANE.
Oh, really?
Sane economists, because the rest kind of work on foundations that we know are wrong. We know they're wrong, and yes, this is exactly why we are where we are, because decisions are made on a basis that we know is toxic.
I was originally, as you know, I was asked to talk about the autumn statement, and we both agree it was a bribery statement.
Yeah.
But also, this country is in debt. It has loans. And I can, £2.25 trillion. For those who are listening, a trillion is a million. I couldn't conceive that money when I heard the figure. Now I can just about barely conceive it. Would you say that it's the effect of this economy that's causing that sort of debt in this country?
Yeah, I mean the whole system is. I think there's a lot of. I'm not alone in saying this. Far from it. Is close to. It's been teetering on the edge of collapse for quite a long time now, and there is no one's coming up with a solution. We're just about getting by. How many years have we had of austerity now? Which is actually counterproductive, by the way, but that's the story. But this is part of the background, and the world, as I say, the world economy has been, it's not a level playing field. It's been deliberately tilted to enrich people who've already got assets. So, in the jargon, inflate asset prices. What does that mean? It actually means if you've got an asset, if you've got land, or if you've got a farm, or if you've got any kind of asset, that the prices of that are going to go up, and you're richer at the expense of everyone else. And that's how the economy is geared. And again, there's no secret about this. It is covered up a little by the complexities, and most economists, other than the sane ones, will cover it up with technicalities and fine sounding language. But we all know it's true, that's part of the outworking of this, maximization of profit and moving wealth in industrial quantities out of the world system and into the pockets of asset owners.
I'm going to bring politics into this. Now, Liz Truss, as you mentioned it before, before we started this, we were talking about a little bit about, you mentioned her name. She and Kwarteng and a few other people produced a book, which is supposed to be the cure, which is what she based her leadership speech on. What I couldn't believe is, on the side, is when at the Conservative conference, she was saying the same phrases again. Penny off tax, 6p off business tax.
Yeah.
Now, that brought us once again close to the brink. Hunter's done a brilliant job, I think, of trying to cure it. I don't think it's curable. Would you agree on that?
Well, it is curable, but not on any of the basis we're currently looking at. And curable in the sense of turning away from the brink. But let me just go back to what you just said. You posed the question implicitly about Liz Truss, and quite rightly shook your head, going, "How could she possibly still be saying the same things after she was given the opportunity to try her formula, and it was so disastrous?" And I can tell you the reason. It is absolutely the same. So Kwarteng, it was there were four people who wrote the book, Britannia Unchained. Kwarteng, Truss, and I can't just now remember the two others, but they are part of that whole group. They're a core part of that whole Tufton Street gang, as they're known, and the Institute of Economic Affairs, which have come. They are direct descendants of the people I was talking about before. Again, I'm not making any of this up. It's all checkable. You can go and find it. Look up the Mount Pelerin Society and move forward from there.
Right.
That's a Hayek put together in 1947, and the reason that they defy logic and defy reality is because their economics is a matter of faith. So a scientist, whenever they see something that doesn't match the theory, called an anomaly, will seize on that anomaly and go, "Okay, so what went wrong? Is the theory wrong? Or was there another factor? Was the dirt in the lens, or was there something that actually wasn't supposed to be there, or whatever?" And they will obsess about that until they find out what went wrong. And if there's nothing went wrong, they then have to reassess their theory, and if necessary, get a new one. Now, that's the way that science works. The way that faith works isn't like that. The way that faith works is, if I were to say to someone, your best friend, that Ian is talking about you behind his back, you wouldn't believe the things he's saying about you, right? If he knew you well, right, he would most probably say, "No, I don't believe you. I know Ian. I know what he's like." So so faith resists a challenge and resists evidence, and this is what ordinary common or garden non-heterodox economists habitually do. So when the reality differs from their theory, they criticize the reality. "Oh, well, the economy would have worked properly if." "Oh, well, we don't have perfect markets. We should have perfect markets, and then it would work as we say." And that's why I say it's provably a system of doctrines and faith.
You see, the thing is, what I couldn't believe is, I've got what they call an eidetic memory. I remember 80% what I hear if I'm interested. If I'm not interested, I forget names for some reason.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing her speech at the conference, and I think, hold on a minute, I've heard this is a tape recording. So what you're purporting, if I'm correct in saying, is because she's a faith economist, she'll ring out the same speech before because she believes it.
Yeah, she believes those doctrines. And if you hear her talking about what happened when she had power, she criticizes all of the things around her. And she says things like, "Well, we just didn't have long enough." I think everyone else thinks they had more than long enough.
Well, she did the same speech. She went to America last year and did exactly the same speech to the economists there.
Yeah.
I still can believe, but see, and Kwarteng really took the bullet in my estimation, in my judgment. But then this is what doesn't make sense to me with this thing of faith. Like I as a child, I was worked to look at things scientifically, look at proof.
Mm.
She's always got the proof it didn't work when she was in government.
Yeah.
But you're saying she just blames everybody else.
Yeah, I mean that's what you do if you're totally committed to a system of thought, in the framing of faith.
Mm.
Everything that doesn't fit in with it is explainable. So something went wrong, even if you don't. And here's a difference. Even if you don't know what it is, or you can only just throw out a few guesses, you're still going to stick to your guns. Whereas, as I say, a true economist who was trying to be scientific, and certainly a scientist, will look at those anomalies and go, okay, I've got to account for this, and I've got to do it, with evidence and detail.
I'm just astonished by this. I didn't know about. Okay, I'm not. As I said before, when we started, I used to keep books and calculations, so I'm quite used to that thing of looking at figures and data, and it's used in what I do. But if I saw an experiment, let's use Pavlov's dogs, for example, the bell.
Yeah.
Right? It's proven that by that stimulus of the bell, it brainwashed the dog into doing that thing. And that's what brainwashing comes from. So I know that's the proof.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, it proved very clearly that you could make a linkage between the bell and the salivation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of laying a track in the brain, isn't it?
Mm. There is something called NLP you might have heard of, Neural Linguistic Programming. And it is, I worked with a hypnotherapist for a couple of years. And we spent that NLP, some things come from there. You call anchoring, you press a button, you press a person's hand, you say something, you convince them. But how I still, it astonishes me that it's like you're blind. So economists will be blind to me.
It is absolutely astonishing. And there's a whole subsection of economics. And a lot of it started by economics students who looked in their first year at what they're being asked to learn and gone, are you for real? So there's a whole movement trying to change economics, and it needs changing. And Steve Keen is at the forefront of that, and Pettifer is part of that, for example. My own approach to this is that it does need changing. It's absolutely responsible for the toxicity, the root of toxicity that now dictates the way that governments and large corporations make their decisions. However, it's no longer the point. The point is that root. The point is the fact that those ideas are so embedded in business and in government, and hard to challenge, almost unchallengeable, that we now need to deal with that, because otherwise we just can't make the change happen.
Like, as I told you before, I think we agree, apart from Yawn, it was the bribery statement last week. All that money went out, millions went out, probably a cool billion, probably altogether, if I worked it out. And yet the country's in trouble. Like, services are being cut. I'm doing an investigation, they jump into services at the moment. I'm hearing more and more evidence that, like, London Council are looking for £600 million to help the homeless. Croydon Council has gone under. Birmingham has already gone under. How many more are going to go? I've heard about a couple that have cut their services to try and survive. What would be, okay, the $6 million question for you. Your starter for 10. What would be the solution? Do you think you know it, or
well, I kind of already said it, really, to be honest. in that the core of the problem is buried there deeply in global culture, and it needs to be challenged. And it's the concepts that we're running the world on. So one of those concepts is the maximization of profit. Allied to that, and hand in hand with that, it's all of a piece really, is the idea of growth. And not growth itself. There's growth is really, crucial and important. We have to grow our food, we have to grow stuff, and we have to manufacture stuff, and that's a kind of growth and so on. But actually, you get what you measure. And what we measure right now is numbers. We measure money. So we're actually running the world on the idea that if we up the numbers, if they get bigger, then we're doing well and we should do more of it. And that is it. We're tearing down forests to do it, because like a forest, a tree standing has no economic value. You cut it down, you turn it into lumber. Now it's got an economic value, and the number goes up. And in principle, that's kind of representative of what we're doing, rather than, and it's a kind of insanity. Instead of stepping back, and this was not the mindset prior to the 70s and 80s. Politicians were expected to pay attention to society and the people in it.
So I've got one final question for you. We are running out of time. And let's see, I've got it right in my head, because I think it'd kill my friend, this would. So we've got to forget profit. Is that what you're saying?
Not quite. And I think it's a mistake to make the word profit a dirty word, because look, if you run a business, all profit means is that you've got to have more money coming in than going out. Otherwise, you're going to go bust, right? So a reasonable profit is not a problem, right? It's got to be there. And a social enterprise doesn't make profit, but they aim to make a surplus. It's another name for the same thing. But the difference between a traditional company and a good social enterprise is that it's balance. The social enterprise will be prosecuting, growing their business in order to achieve their social aim, the social good, and the surplus or profit is just a part of that picture. So the word profit isn't, is unreasonably blasted in my view. This isn't a very subtle argument. It's very, it's just too simplistic to say profit's the problem. It's the maximization of profit. It's putting profit above people and profit above planet that's the problem.
Well, thank you, Barry. I'm sorry it's such a short time. I'm going to ask you to come back again at some stage.
Thank you.
And we'll talk more about the money. I'd be very interested in these people you speak, so I'm going to look them up.
Please do. Yeah, I'll look forward to it, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, if you send me an email with their names, maybe the best thing, because, God, I'm doing loads of research for this thing. This podcast is expanding in its viewpoint.
Yeah, good stuff.
So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you'd like to have a question for Barry. If you do, you can always contact me on my email,